every year I promise myself I'm going to keep a reading diary of the books that I've read so that when I get to the end of the year, I know what I've read. I know whether I read it this year or last year, and I can provide some more commentary. But I'm going to, in this short video, talk you through a few of the books that have impacted my thinking this year as it relates to story copywriting, business storytelling. The first book is Story by Robert McKee. And I'm sorry to say that this book sat for a long time on my bookshelf because it's a hefty book. It's a decent read, especially if you have small children who steal your attention every time you try to read a few pages. And I think the reason that I delayed reading it was because it's primarily about the principles of screenwriting. And I have a bit of a to and fro relationship with craft books. So craft being the craft of storytelling. Often for you telling stories to promote you and your work, it's useful to understand the principles of craft. It's useful to understand the story arc and the internal conflicts and the principles of suspense and learning how to keep people reading by telling an engaging story. But you often don't need to go to the same depths as someone writing a novel or a play. What I found in this book, however, this is a deeply profound piece of work. Something I thought was interesting in the book was he talks about the differences between novels, plays, and movies. And he says that novels are actually best at getting inside people's heads, at giving you a glimpse of what people are thinking, what they're worrying about. A movie, on the other hand, is best at demonstrating the outward, sort of the external events, the big explosions, the conflicts. So the media almost determines which type of story that you tell. And I thought that was quite useful for us because obviously the media kind of determines the same thing. If you're making a video, then you kind of have to tell people, you're still you're still creating a picture in people's minds through the words that you use, but it's a bit harder to kind of tell people what you were thinking. I think the written word is really the best way to let people inside your head, to demonstrate the choices that you've had to make and the agony that you faced making those choices and the consequences of those choices. That's really where the written word stands out, I think. So in short, I'd strongly recommend Story. It is out of print. What I found, however, is that it's very expensive on Amazon. You can find it in places like Abe Books, a bit cheaper. So have a bit of a look around. I do think it's worth picking up. The next book that I read that I found truly outstanding and really blew me away was The Wave in the Mind by Ursula K. Le Guin, who is one of my favourite authors. She was primarily known as a sci-fi author. This book is a book of essays on writing, very varied. The two chapters that I'd really point you towards, she has a bit of a discussion about rhythm and how the rhythm impacts how people engage with the writing. And she analyses a chapter from Tolkien's Lord of the Rings, and she looks for repeating patterns, and she takes it right down to sentence level and shows you what's going on. So, a very interesting read. I really do recommend this book. Again, I'm sorry to say that it's sat on my bookshelf for a while until something prodded me. It's like, oh yeah, it's time to read that now. And I'm now sorry that I didn't read it sooner. Another craft book this time that I've had on my bookshelf for a while is Story Genius by Lisa Cron. Again, this is geared towards people who are writing a novel, not people who are necessarily trying to tell their story to promote their work. What I thought was interesting about this story was that what Lisa says is that if you're writing a novel, the beginning of the story isn't the beginning of the telling. So what you have to do in planning a novel is you have to, in thinking about your protagonist, and obviously in you telling your story, you are the protagonist, you have to take the story right back to the very beginning. That isn't going to necessarily be the starting point, so you have to then decide where the starting point is, and the starting point is the opposite of the finale of the story. That's really the takeaway. The other thing that Lisa talks about in the book is that it's not the external timeline events, it's not the external events that drive the story forward, it's the internal moments of conflict, it's the internal change, the internal character arc that the main character goes through that drives the external events. So almost in planning your story, if you're planning out, say, an email series to tell your, what I call your core story, you want to identify maybe 6 or 7 stories from your past that are key turning points that have led you to where you are today, then it's actually helpful to think about the internal moments of change, not the external events. So that might be helpful to you. More recently, the book I've just finished is Liberation by Rachel Elmore. This is not specifically a storytelling book or a marketing book. I've mentioned it really because of the design. So what Rachel does in the book is, this side of the book is about liberation from a perspective of, joy, abundance, love, vitality. If you flip the book over, it approaches the topic of liberation from the opposite angle. So it's almost like liberation is the coin, and these are 2 different sides of the same coin. You got joy, abundance, love, etc. on this side. On this side, you've got how to transcend fear, struggle, pain, scarcity. So I thought I would share that with you, because if you're writing about your topic, you can almost adopt the same idea. You can attack it from this way, in terms of what people are trying to move towards, what people are trying to create, what people are trying to manifest. Or you can approach it from this angle, in terms of what they're currently struggling with, what they're trying to move away from. I think you want to do both of those things, but I've never seen it this clearly done in the structure of the book itself. I do also recommend the book contents. I think what I'm slowly learning over time is that this work is all about consciousness. It's all about collective consciousness, and us moving forward, being able to, communicate our genius so that we can do the work that really matters. That's what I think this is all about. So I hope that's useful. Do go and pick up Story by Robert McKee. Do go and pick up The Wave in the Mind by Ursula K. Le Guin. If you have read any books this year that have changed your thinking, perhaps impacted you as a person, I'm all ears. I always love to explore new books. It drives Lindsay mad that I buy books at an infinitely faster rate than I read them. But yeah, if you read anything that's been really helpful to you, let me know. Let me know in the comments. Send me a quick email. I'd love to hear it. Thanks for paying attention this year, and I look forward to sending you more stuff next year.